Stand Up.
Hello and welcome to the Friday show here on Stand Up. Thank you very much for all your support this week. What a week of shows. Thank you to all the new subscribers as well. I have nothing super original to say at the top of today's show. I'm just going to repeat that I'm on my way up to hang out with my boys, like 19 guys from high school, and I'm really looking forward to getting away for the weekend. Haven't done that in forever, much less a boys' weekend like this. So glad to have them and you in my life. So many new friends here, and so many of you are making friends as well. We did the hangout on Wednesday night this week, and then a whole bunch of you went over to Discord and hung out for a really long time. I love it. You fill my cup every week, and I'm glad to be so happy and proud to be a part of this growing community. I've got an awesome show, two awesome conversations, I should say. Joining me today, I've got Christian Finnegan. Ophira was unable to join us again, but we will be in Fairfield, Connecticut, June 11th, all three of us. Saturday, June 11th, Fairfield Comedy Club. Get your tickets now. 2 shows, by the way. If you're in or around Fairfield, we'd love to meet you. Always a really good time. This will be, I think, our third performance together. And also joining me on the show, the great Jared Yates Sexton, author, podcaster, professor, and great writer. Awesome conversation with him as well. So let's get it started, shall we? Here on a lovely summer Friday. Is it summer? Technically, it's not, but I feel like it kind of is. Hope you do too, and I hope you're well wherever you're at. Email me if you're not, or if you are. Send me your vitamin N pictures, standupwithpete@gmail.com, and join our community. Just go to standupwithpete.com right now and join us. So many new subscribers coming in. I don't know what it is, but it is really amazing, and I'm very excited about what's happening and about the future of the show and our community that we're creating. All right. A guy who's a member of our community, who's created his own over at the Muckrake podcast, joins me now. Jared Yates Sexton, political analyst and author. His work has appeared in the New York Times, New Republic, Political Salon, The Daily Beast, and so many other places. Author of several books, most recently, American Rule, How a Nation Conquered the World but Failed Its People, and we talk about his new book coming up. He's a co-host of the Muckrake podcast. He's an associate professor of creative writing at Georgia Southern University. You should subscribe to his Substack, jaredyatessexton.substack.com, as well as his Twitter. You can find him there at JY Always a great conversation, a sobering conversation. Here we go.
This was one of those weird summers where I had to travel immediately. And so I have to tell you, Pete, on top of having to travel, turn in the grades, all that stuff, I had a book that I had to crunch all last summer.
The Midnight Kingdom, A History of Power, Paranoia, and the Coming Crisis, available now for pre-order?
That book, exactly. The Midnight Kingdom, A History of Power, Paranoia, and the Current Crisis. And basically last summer, I basically had to take like 5 years worth of research and crunch it down into about a year and a half.
Right, I remember you doing that.
Yeah, so it was round-the-clock stuff. And I got to tell you, I think you and I are very similar in this, Pete. I'm not good with time. Like, just having free time. Yeah. I'm real bad with it.
That's right.
So I've had to, like, navigate that. I've had to try and take care of myself. I'm trying to get back into a good routine. I'm going to do some writing, do some reading, do all that good stuff. So it's navigating that. Lots of baseball, lots of downtime if possible.
Great. Oh, that's great. So last summer was occupied with the research for the book, and this summer you're going to try to have a little bit more of a life and relax a little more and be a little less stressed, work less. Is that what I'm hearing?
I don't know about all that. I mean, that's a very presumptive prescription right there. Listen.
How often will you watch a baseball game? Will you go to a baseball game? How many innings will you allow yourself to watch? I want to know exactly how much time.
I love the inherent message behind that, which is that I think you find baseball boring.
No.
I think it's
no. You read me wrong. I'm seriously like I used to love baseball. I don't like it as much as I used to. I used to love it. My dad and I would always go to games. First time I ever went to New York City, played baseball a little bit, but I'm wondering, it's just strictly a question of like how you evaluate your time, what you give yourself to watch America's pastime, a thing that you love. Like, what do you give to yourself? What do you allow for yourself?
So I will put it on mostly every day.
Yeah.
And it's a wonderful background.
Exactly. I love that. Yep. The radio too.
Perfect. The sights, the sounds, the movement of it. I'll walk in and out. I'll do things, just kind of have it on in the background. So most days, more days than not, I have baseball on.
Who do you watch? Do you watch one team?
I'm a Chicago Cubs guy, and they're in a real death spiral right now. And I have to tell you that when you have a bad baseball team that you follow, it makes the summer really different.
Yeah. Do you stop watching as much because it's too painful if they're not playing well, or is it still the same thing to you? Like, I enjoy the game, I enjoy having it on.
I watch it as much, but it sort of becomes almost like a meditative sort of a process. You know, all of a sudden you're like, this season is not about winning. This season is about the experience of the season. It's like sand art, right? You're building up a thing that will be blown away, and people will not remember this for years to come.
I don't know what happened to your sand art, but it's there. It's still there in your soul. The Midnight Kingdom, A History of Power, Paranoia, and the Coming Crisis, now available for pre-order, and I don't think it was the last time we talked. So I guess congratulations that it's up. I see the cover. It looks great, and it must.
No, it doesn't. That's a stand-in cover.
It looks terrible. I don't like it at all. I think it's bullshit, and you should do more with it, like you did American Rule. But hey, who am I to judge? So it must. We've talked about it before, but I mean, just give me one example of how the past is prologue for what we're at now, because there's a lot. I think this is the impetus in a way for you writing it.
This was one of these books that, like, I don't know about you, but I'm one of those people that I really question why things are the way they are.
Sure.
And
yeah.
When I was a kid, listen, I was a complete little dick about this. People would just say, that's the way it is. And I was like, that is not sufficient. And in this book, I wanted to go back to basically the beginnings of modern history to start getting an idea of how we've arrived at this point. And what I've discovered in all of it is that these narratives and mythologies and conspiracy theories that everybody wants to pretend are brand new are basically how power and wealth have protected themselves for a very, very long time. Yeah. And one of the things you'll find in this book is that these conspiracy theories that we're dealing with right now have been in circulation for generations and generations and generations. And hopefully we can learn what they are, why they work, and how we can defeat them, because we're currently, we're marching up on the precipice of something really, really ugly. And we need to understand these things if we're going to have a chance.
Give me an example of like a conspiracy theory generally that comes back over and over.
Well, it all comes back. I always refer to it as sort of a 3-point neo-fascist, proto-fascist sort of an idea. So we live in America, right? Which means that reactionary right-wing people are going to tell us, hey, guess what? People outside of this country, particularly shadowy influences, which almost always means Jewish or, sort of Jewish adjacent,
right,
are working to destroy the country. By the way, they're working in tandem with liberal traitors on the inside, and they're going back and forth. And then meanwhile, people of color and sort of vulnerable populations, they're not intelligent enough to understand they're being manipulated. So they're sort of being used as almost like an invisible army by these two factors. And in case you're following the plot of this story, it means that reactionary, conservative, right-wing people need to have total control, or else the country will be destroyed.
Yeah, that's something I think that many of us are learning as we see the sausage get made in terms of legislation, whether it be guns or abortion, right? Much less elections, like total control. Even if they lose, they win. And obviously taking over the courts the way that they have with their 30-year strategy has proven, has allowed them to do that. But you're saying, I mean, this has always been the case with this type of ideology.
Yeah, and the thing that I found, I started the book basically when the Roman Empire sort of merged with Christianity. And one of the things that you find is that there's this battle between what we would call empirical knowledge, which is like water freezes at 32 degrees Fahrenheit, right? And what I call revealed knowledge, which is, God spoke to me and he told me, if you don't let me do this, things are going to go very, very badly. And so what we find with right-wing, reactionary, conservative movements is they basically make up these stories, these conspiracy theories, this sort of revealed knowledge that says, guess what? Things are going in a really bad direction. And if we aren't allowed to have total power by any means necessary, which includes violence, anti-democratic coups, takeovers of governments, whatever, eventually it's going to lead to the apocalypse. right? And anybody who disagrees with them, they're not doing it in good faith. They're actually doing it because they're part of a larger conspiracy theory to destroy the nation, destroy Christendom, you name it. But basically, it's the same conspiracy theory over and over.
Same conspiracy theory over and over, and we are seeing it so ever present. But the difference, I suppose, is the way that it gets spread within seconds versus longer periods of time, and that therein lies, I think, the real difference. And the real scary part of this is social media, the internet, phones in your pockets, graphics, fake, what's it called when you can impersonate a person? I mean, you can create anything you want and you can spread it far faster than the Romans could have.
Yeah, one of the frightening parts about this, like I was saying, these conspiracy theories and these narratives, they protect the wealthy. And as a result, the wealthy are always really interested in these things. This is why whenever you see concentrated capital and particularly entrenched wealth, they almost always go with conservative reactionaries whenever they feel like their power, their wealth is going to be attacked or endangered. Well, in this case, not only do you have a situation where big tech is where the concentrated capital is, all of their products profit off of this.
Yeah.
They're all wired to profit off of those conspiracy theories because, of course, it pushes engagement and it pushes fear and anxiety and sort of, doom scrolling or looking at all these YouTube videos or you name it. So it's actually a weird acceleration that, we saw with the printing press, but now it's just absolutely on steroids with social media.
You've made this point over and over in so many different ways, and I think it's worth just unpacking. But, a tweet like this one that you wrote, in the future, public schools will be subjected to round-the-clock shooting drills in a security state that is both ineffective and traumatizing. Meanwhile, wealthy kids will go to school to learn how to manage and profit from that security state. And the reason why I think that's the way to back up that idea, because that's not just a sarcastic or cynical conspiratorial tweet or divisive tweet. It's what I see the example is so many people voting specifically for Republican simply to protect their own wealth. We're talking about they won't raise our taxes. They don't care about other things because they don't have to. Health insurance, violence in their schools, racism, sexism. They don't believe they have to. Climate, they're in the moment. They're not worried. They're only voting on taxes. The only thing they know is, he going to raise my taxes? Is she? I'm voting. Doesn't matter how disgusting of a person they are. Doesn't matter what they support. I feel like that's the most. You hear that? I hear it all the time. I'm voting for the guy who won't raise my taxes. Well, what about the fact that he's an absolute monster? Don't care.
Yeah, absolutely.
Don't need to care. More importantly, don't need to.
No, you don't. The Republican Party has hacked into one of the most poisonous and toxic traits, particularly in American culture, which is not just individualism, but individual selfishness. And so, for instance, one of the examples I've kind of started to use is we live in this culture of sort of wealth being able to buy itself, sort of an exit or a round around of like the worst parts of society. One of the things I always talk about is sort of a toll road, right? If you want to pay extra, you can go ahead and you can get like a free road, mostly free of traffic. You can go faster. You can get the place that you need to go faster. In all of this, the Republican Party is basically saying, hey, you don't have to worry about other people. You don't have to worry about what a shitty condition American life is in. You can simply buy your way around it, particularly if you're a wealthy white person. And all of this sort of generational agreement that we're dealing with, including quote unquote wokeness or progressives, which have no actual power if you actually look at all of this, it's almost like you can live in a country where you can't be bothered by it, right? You don't have to see it on your TV shows. You don't have to hear about the conversations. You don't have to come across on social media. Yeah. More or less, it's a consumer white identity movement as opposed to anything else that is being turned into an authoritarian religious movement.
So well said. Absolutely a consumer white supremacist movement. I haven't quite heard the word consumer put in there, but it's exactly what we're seeing.
Well, look at Donald Trump. One of the things that we don't like to really deal with is the fact that, people aren't really attracted to what Trump says. They're not particularly attracted to his personality. I mean, he has all of the personality of, of family trauma and like people suffering, right?
Yeah.
What they actually care about is putting on the hat, putting on the shirt, flying the flag. It's like you're expressing your own consumer identity through Trump.
Right.
And because Trump was able to put his name on board games, steaks, water, all these types of things. What he was actually doing in this case was he was giving people the consumer identity in order to say, guess what? I don't care about your feelings. I don't care about progressivism.
Yes.
Also, by the way, you can call me a misogynist or racist. I do not care. I'm tougher than that. I do not have the empathy that you do, or I'm just tired of this. One of the biggest sellers right now is like Trump flags that say Trump, no more bullshit. And that idea is like, you basically have a shirt. I'm sure you've seen this. It's like, you see shirts that's like, I see stupid people, or sarcasm, just another service I offer, or whatever. It's like an attitude that we can sort of display out in the world that expresses who we think we are, who we want to present to other people. Well, and the Republican Party has really capitalized on that through Trump.
I have something to offer you for, another article, tweet, or book, which is I'm sure you've seen these actually as I'm saying it, but there's a store, specifically a store in Lake George, New York. I'm forgetting what it is. All it does is sell T-shirts, mostly T-shirts, with that kind of thing on it. Virtue signaling, value signaling, whatever. I interviewed, he wouldn't go on the record with me, but I interviewed the owner basically saying that he doesn't believe in that stuff. And his daughter is really liberal, and even though he's a conservative, but he doesn't believe most of the stuff, but he's selling it. So I think that's interesting. He makes a fortune. But the point is, there's an actual store making money, which proves the point that you're making. Furthermore, I saw a guy walk in a restaurant the other night. It was a casual-ish restaurant in my town. He had with his kid, his 5-year-old kid, and he had a T-shirt on that said, "Let's go, Brandon." And I was just so grossed out by it. It's such a newish thing, it seems.
Yeah, it's a weird thing. I was driving through the country a couple of days ago, and I started to notice, I said this on the Monk Craig podcast the other day. Trump lost the election nearly 2 years ago. And we still have Trump 2020 signs everywhere. We've got
my next door neighbor.
Yeah, if you drive around in the country, like out in rural America, you just see it over and over and over again. And it's not about the individual, it's about what the individual represents. Right. The same thing with the Confederate flag, right? The Confederate flag obviously has racist, white supremacist overtones, but it also has a message which says, I do not like the way things are. Things could be different. It's a consumer expression of a worldview. And unfortunately, and this is one of the bigger problems in America that's been dominated by both capital and exploitation, we've gotten to the point where, I'm sorry, but politics can't really solve our problems anymore. And that's by design. Like, government has been depowered, has been turned into a traffic jam, more or less, by design in order to take power away from representative government. And at this point, a lot of people, the most that they can possibly do is find an expression of what their political identity is as a consumer product.
Yep.
And that's taken away like what government and what politics can actually do.
It brings us back to, we were talking about baseball at the beginning. It used to be, we signaled our favorite team. You might wear like a pro wrestler shirt, I guess. I remember this one kid used to wear race car, like drivers, Davey Allison, whoever the hell it was, Dale Earnhardt. But I guess they were divisive in the most fun way. If a kid came to school in upstate New York wearing a San Francisco Giants, what's wrong with you? And you'd bust chops.
So I love that you brought this up, because let's go ahead and go with the NASCAR angle. Back in my day, it was Dale Earnhardt Sr., right? Yep. The Intimidator. And the idea was he was the man in black. And as a result, if you were a Dale Earnhardt fan, that said something about who you were. Yeah. Let's go ahead and take it into football. Now I guess it's the Las Vegas Raiders. Of course, it used to be the Oakland and Los Angeles Raiders, who are notorious for being rule breakers, which is actually funny because there's a cultural ethos among the Raiders that you don't really care about the rules. And of course, you're all rebels. Well, that creates a sort of back and forth in terms of personality. Who are you? Who do you define yourself as? And as you're playing that role, it starts to take over. In America, you don't have to look much further than this hyper-masculine culture in which men are basically now presenting themselves through their vehicles, their clothes, their weapons, all of this. They're pretending to be special force operators.
Yes.
And eventually what ends up happening is if you play a role for too long, and I know that you know this, you're around enough people who, are either comedians or in showbiz. You start playing a role for too long, you're not playing a role anymore. Yep. You start to mold
becomes your identity. Yeah.
And what we've seen in this country is we've seen a lot of consumer choices, particularly consumer appeals that override our own conscious sort of ideas of who we are. We've been completely overwhelmed by it to the point where we basically live in a fantasy world that is on the brink of like widespread, massive violence and political upheaval.
Yeah, well said, of course. I wanted to ask you specifically about your last two pieces at jaredyatessexton.substack.com. If you're not subscribing, you ought to, as well as to the Muckrake podcast. But they are related, no isolated incident, and this is going to get really ugly really soon are the titles. I haven't talked to you since Buffalo, much less Uvalde in Texas, but this is like we see the game plan from Christchurch to Tucker Carlson to Alex Jones to mainstream politicians, and every Republican should be asked their view on replacement theory right away. Connect the dots for me as it plays out in real violence here and across the world.
Well, so let's go back to this idea that politics has been captured by wealth and the wealthy. It has gotten to the point where austerity and neoliberalism have basically been able to squeeze America for everything it's worth. We have a huge divide in inequality. We have a lot of people who are worth, they're coming up on trillions of dollars at this point. We've got other people who aren't able to get ahead. The American dream is starting to crumble as a mythology. It's see-through. We live in a pretty hopeless feeling type situation. I think you probably feel it. Your listeners can feel it. And eventually, when things get to that point, when there isn't that sort of uniting mythology, or at least sort of a story that there are people there to represent us, tension gets worse and worse. Republicans, of course, are telling a different type of story. Republicans are going ahead and explaining what's happening through conspiracy theories. They're saying, of course, there are people on the outside, people on the inside who are conspiring to make your lives, awful. Basically, they're telling white Americans that George Soros and other shadowy Jewish figures are working with liberal Democrats in the United States of America to replace them with, again, the vulnerable population, immigrants, people of color, in order to take over the country and make it more compliant in order to take guns and throw you in FEMA camps. Well, here's the thing. That is an explanation that is, for a lot of people, more digestible than talking about neoliberalism and hypercapitalism.
Yeah, right. It's easily,
That's a really hard thing to explain. I'm sitting here, before we were talking, I'm reading this book. This is a book that it's The Rise and Fall of the Neoliberal Order by Gary Gersell. Guess what? It took me years to have to understand most of the economics that are going to be discussed in this book. I've had to put in a lot of time. I've had to acquaint myself with a lot of these ideas in order to understand what's happening in economics and politics in this country. A lot of people, it doesn't mean that they're dumb. It means they don't have the time to necessarily understand that. The Republican Party and conservatives for, centuries at this point, they excel at giving an alternative explanation that suits their goals and the goals of the wealthy that they represent.
Yeah.
And in all of this, here's the thing, Pete. Let's take this at face value. If there is a literal conspiracy by foreign elements and domestic elements to take over the country and throw people into camps, take their guns, possibly kill their children, and ruin the future and lead to an apocalyptic situation, it is logical for people to turn to violence.
Yeah.
That is. It's
logical. Even easier. If I believed the election was stolen, it would be logical for me to turn to violence. If I believe that, and increasingly that has only grown amongst those on the right.
Exactly right. And so one of the things that's happening in all of this, and there are parts of the Republican Party who understand this, and there are parts of the Republican Party that don't, right? Like they're playing a game or whatever. There are other parts of it that totally understand like the dangers that are taking place in all of this. But what is happening is they're playing a dangerous game. In all of these situations, we're looking at not only escalating violence. So in both of these, and I want to say both of these mass shootings, but that isn't specific enough in these modern times because, of course, we're a country that's drowning in guns. We're a country that more or less, with this individualistic streak, it's a bunch of people who look at each other as their enemies. They don't trust each other. There's not a lot of empathy and or belonging or communal feeling. That's all been drained out, basically intentionally. You have in Buffalo, you have a person who literally believes that there is this conspiracy to take over the country and hand it over to other people. And again, this person took it at face value, literally believed it, and thought that they were a soldier in an invisible war. What we have in Texas is we have a person who has basically, if you look at the history of this, gone through a family that is fractured, had problems within a school system. And by the way, I'm sure you have a lot of listeners who know that the school system is really problematic. Public education has been under attack. It's been underfunded. And then on top of it, you've got addiction, which is another symptom of all of this. So on one hand, yes, the problem is guns. On another hand, yes, the problem is mental illness. On the other hand, by the way, the thing that I have come around on the past couple of days, we have to get the age limit up on guns.
Yeah.
Because 18-year-olds are very, very young. And their concept of what is right or wrong or what is permanent or whatever, that needs to change. But these things that we're seeing are expressions of a larger socioeconomic political problem that is squeezing America. It's why things feel so bad, why people are so desperate, why they're getting ready to turn to violence. But it's also another expression, which is our government has been depowered intentionally. There's not a lot that they can do. There's a lack of political courage for sure. And I'm sure you've looked at this over the past couple of days, poll numbers in favor of all this are astronomical. I mean, we're talking
the gun laws. Yeah.
Yeah, for 80% for gun reform. But we simply have a system that was designed on purpose in the 18th century by a bunch of white, wealthy, slave-holding men to privilege white, wealthy men. And so you have a minoritarian government that has also been depowered, particularly at the federal level, on purpose. And so all these things come together and you look at it and it's horrific, but it is an expression of a nation in decline right now.
Very, very, very well said. You know, one solution I have found, I really believe this, and it's hard to, you can't regulate this. It's not government's role per se. Maybe it is. We could find a way. But you mentioned people losing community. It's such a big thing. It was such a big thing when I moved where I live in the suburbs. And as a result of the pandemic and the podcast, we've created a community here. You've created a community with the Muckrake community in your podcast. And I think that is really wonderful and super important, which is why I didn't plan that, but now I'm doubling down into it. I get rid of the news segment I was selling my community of listeners, poisoning them with the drip, drip, drip that they didn't even need. And I want to focus on the community in as many ways as I can to find solutions and problems and just help each other along this journey to lessen suffering. What do you think of that tagline?
I think it's dead on. And, the one thing I keep telling people is that the solution in all of this is solidarity. It always is.
Yeah.
And what you find with the rise of neoliberalism is basically it's the idea that society should be atomized, that we're all individual consumers and that we're all competitors. And when we all compete with one another, particularly for jobs, for profit, for our place in society, that also does another thing, which ensures that you're not going to have a lot of labor movements. You're not going to have a lot of popular movements. You're not going to have a democratic movement, small d, of course. And in all of this, we've seen an atomization. We've seen an alienation. We've gotten to the point, of course, where in communities, people don't necessarily know their neighbors. They're not involved in civic institutions. They're not necessarily, maybe they're not volunteering or they're not running for office or they're not engaging in their own sort of representative government. And in all of that, that's advantageous for the concentration of wealth. It ensures that a few people are going to continue to make more and more money and gain more and more power. But it also leads to giant problems. And neoliberalism has shown in one society after another that the worse that it gets and the more atomized things get, this idea of a nation or a society, it starts to fall apart because it focuses on this individualism through consumerism. And eventually that thing just starts to evaporate. And I think we're watching that process right now.
Yes. And you're documenting it well, and we're doing our best to combat it in any number of ways that we can. So thank you for explaining it to us, as always, for joining me. And I hope people will. Well, I'll give all the plugs on the way out. Jared, thank you very much. I really appreciate it. Do you have any anything else you want to say? Any questions? Anything you want to add here at the end, Jared?
Any questions?
Do you have any questions for me?
I just want to say, I just want to note this is important. I think it is important for these communities.
Yeah.
I don't know how you're feeling about everything that's going on right now. I was sitting here today as I was reading this. I was thinking about all this. there is a feeling of existential despair.
Oh,
you know what I mean?
Oh, yeah. At all ages, like all ages and generations, I think are feeling it, whether they're apathetic or plugged in or not. Yeah, yes.
You know, I was sitting here, I was reading these articles, and you know, you see this thing that's happening. I mean, the Biden administration is basically involved in its own little civil war within the West Wing right now. The Democratic Party has
that palace intrigue reporting from yeah.
And, you know, everybody's just like, why doesn't anybody do anything or whatever? And I will say that I think that the answer in all of this goes back to that community building. It has to, because the ways in which this type of a system gets challenged is from the outside, from popular movements. I think BLM and the summer protests that we had there gave us insight into how much power there is when you're able to bring communities into all of this. But simply looking to a government that's captured by this sort of concentrated capital and expecting it to take care of things for you, it doesn't have results. And these communities that we're building, whether it's podcast or whether it's coming together to talk about what's happening down the street, or, you know, coming together and walking out because of gun violence, I think that's the answer. And I think there is hope. Again, I know that I talk about a lot of tough stuff, but I do think that there is hope. And it comes from basically saying, no, I will not accept this. The future will not look like the present. It has to get better.
Right. Yeah. Well, that's the way I have to see it. That's the way as a parent I have to see it. That's the way I want my kids to see it. But you got to be involved too. You have to still continue to be the change you want to see, or it's definitely not getting better. So I told you we won. Did I tell you we won the BOE seats, 2 seats in we beat the anti-CRT racist people?
We have to celebrate our victories where we get them.
Oh yeah,
right?
It's probably the best thing I've ever been a part of. It was amazing.
Yeah, and by the way, look at how rewarding that is. You know, whenever you watch someone like a Donald Trump lose in a national election, like there's this outburst of joy. But when you're involved in some sort of an organizing or some sort of a politicking, even if it is at that level, a board of education seat, I mean, my God, and that builds. If you are involved in a campaign, if you're involved in some sort of solidarity movement, I'm sorry, it's addictive.
Well, and it's addictive. It's addictive for a lot of reasons. The purpose that you get, but you make friends. It's not nearly as intimidating as I thought it would be. I've made so many new friends with like-minded, amazing, thoughtful, anti-racist, anti-sexist people. And yeah, now that list, frankly, of people is now organizing for other elections in our state and in our town. It's a wonderful thing to be a part of. It's so rewarding. I feel bad I hadn't gotten more involved more locally in the past.
Yeah, and I think that is absolutely key in all of this. It's understanding that you can be the change you want to see in the world.
Yep, Steve Bannon is, so we have to too.
No, that's the thing. The right has just out-hustled everybody for decades. And it's been one of those things, and this is something Americans have to take a look in the mirror at. How long did we ignore things like Board of Education seats?
Yep.
How long did we ignore
longer than they did?
Yes, and now we've reached a point, and this is something nobody likes to talk about. Power has moved from the federal level to the state level. That's where it's at now. And it's going to, and that top-down sort of idea is going to shift now, and that's one of the reasons they're going after these school boards. Why they're peddling these QAnon conspiracy theories. Because they're going to take over local governments, they're going to take over public education, and that plan is going to continue to roll as the federal government, which was, and we both know this, you covered this for forever, it was overpowered for a very long time, and now it has been systematically depowered and dismantled. So now we have to fight at the local level. We have no choice.
Absolutely right. Stay awake, be vigilant, pay attention, get involved. Thank you so much for showing us the way, sir. You're like Boba Fett.
Buddy.
You're like Boba Fett. Boba Fett. This is the way. What show was that? Wasn't that Boba Fett? You didn't watch that? Star Wars? He has spoken?
You know, I've been out on Star Wars for a couple of years. I'm taking a break. I'm coming back. I'm watching the original trilogy. I'll find it.
Jared, thank you very, very much. Always appreciate it.
Thanks, buddy.
All right, Jared Yates Sexton. How about it? Go check out his Substack, his podcast, his Twitter, and of course his books, and all of them are linked in today's show notes. Please let Jared know that you heard him here on the show and that you appreciate him joining us. That's the best thing you can do to help me every day that you listen and if you're on Twitter. Okay, Now it's time for my weekly conversation with Christian Finnegan and Ophira Eisenberg. However, Ophira, I don't think, is going to be able to join us. I'm actually just about to welcome Christian into the chat and bring him on to the show for you. And of course, Christian is a hilarious comedian who has had several comedy specials. Amazing on the Twitter. I love him on Twitter, at Craig Finnegan. And he's got a brand new newsletter about music, which we are loving. New music for olds. I hope you'll subscribe and consider a paid subscription for that. And of course, see Christian, Ophira, and I on Saturday, June 11th in Fairfield, Connecticut at the Fairfield Comedy Club. Ladies and gentlemen, let's do it. Okay, there he is, Christian Finnegan. Again, just the two of us. Maybe Ophira will pop in, but I was tight for time.
She's working on these summer hours, man.
Yeah, she's summer hours, but hopefully she'll join us. But she'll definitely join us in Fairfield on Saturday, June 11th, which I'm very much looking forward to being with you guys again. I love it. Thank you for doing that.
Thank you for doing that.
I don't know.
Okay. I'm definitely looking forward to it. Haven't seen you guys in a while. And so we're going to do a fun couple shows, 7 and 9 o'clock, FairfieldComedyClub.com.
Yeah, FairfieldComedyClub.com. Should be a fun night. Last time we took questions from the audience. It was really fun. People just submitted any questions they want about anything at all. And we acted like the experts.
Anonymous questions, too. So, they're real. Yeah, because we give out slips of paper at the beginning. So people don't have to, feel pressure.
That was really fun. Almost as fun as watching you guys and also watching me make it up as I go along. I think it goes on to something with a bit. I'm really excited about it, though. My gay experience with the plumber is really evolving into something real and maybe an actual relationship with that guy.
Hey, the world's ending, man. If you're going to have a relationship with a plumber, now's the time. Don't die in a climate or fascism catastrophe not having had sex with that plumber you had your eye on.
Thank you for seeing me and the world the way that it actually is. That feels good. Lots of things, as always, that we could talk about, and I'm very happy to see you. First of all, your newsletter, New Music for Olds, is getting better and better. I'm very excited about it. I'm happy to be a paid subscriber, and I think everybody should be. But this week, something weird happened when one listener of this show suggested you listen to another listener's band. That is dicey. It's dicey, right? Because that can go sideways real quick, and it puts you in a position where maybe you've got to be a little phony. But not the case.
I mean, it's always an awkward thing. It's an awkward thing even just in life when somebody's like, "Hey, listen to my band," or "Listen to my friend's band." But yeah, it's especially awkward when when you're doing a newsletter and it really is just something you're theoretically doing for yourself. It's like, you don't want to feel like you just don't want to turn into something that all of a sudden you're dreading. Cause it's like, oh God, like so-and-so is not going to be upset. It's whatever. But the crisis was averted because the band is actually great.
Yeah. Harbor Coat, Manny Carlson is the band. And of course, Dan McDonald is the shithead that put him in a tough spot, and you in a tough spot. Yeah.
Yeah.
Not good, Dan.
But yeah, that was a real sigh of relief.
Real risk. The one question I want to ask you about music is, and I know you're not necessarily the expert on it, but you certainly know a lot more than a lot of people, especially being a comic.
I'm an enthusiast, more, no less.
Just about the idea of like trying to make money in a band, like Matt and a lot of other guys, 40 and over, whatever, it's a side hustle and you can make a little cash, but I feel like it's only doing gigs. And he's talked to me about, Spotify and how hard it is, but it's the same thing for the most part for comics, except we don't have to split the money with anybody else. I think I'm not sure what else is that different. What do you think about the kind of the music industry in terms of actually making any kind of scratch at all, much less
it's terrifying and it's awful, and every time I think I have it bad as a comedian, I think of what it must be like for musicians who work 3 times as hard. Between just not only just practicing your craft and having to lug gear and to load in and to do all these things. And it's like, if I go to a stand-up show and there's 8 people in the audience, that's a hit to my ego. But at least I don't have to then, take down my drum kit and, and then return the van that I've rented for the night. It's a completely different animal. But the thing obviously about music is that the rewards are higher at the high end of it. If you become a successful band, you're making money that is out of the stratosphere compared to being a successful comedian. I think. I mean, very few comedians play Madison Square Garden. Lots of bands do,
right?
And so there is that aspect to it. But yeah, I mean, I think if we're all being honest with ourselves, if you get to a certain point in your life, your aspirations are different. You're not being like, hey, I'm going to put my album with my friends on Spotify and, in 3 months, we're going to be playing Coachella, main stage Coachella.
Or any stage Coachella.
Yeah.
I'm guessing.
But, so it has to be for different reasons. You have to be you have different goals in mind. And sometimes the goal is just to satisfy the part of yourself that likes being creative and to have like-minded people enjoy it. And that's enough. I mean, honestly, if I'm being perfectly frank, that's probably where my stand-up career is headed. I think that if I was going to be like massive, that would have happened. And so you have to find different goals in life. And I think some of that just happens just organically because I don't have the energy to try to be huge, even if that was a possibility.
Yeah, I think there's nothing wrong with that. Because the energy needed...
It's the story of 99% of us. And it's the story of some of my favorite artists. It's not, it means nothing. It's a very specific personality type. I'm not even talking about all the lucky breaks that have to happen for you to become massive and all those things. But it's also a very specific personality type that can keep that plate spinning for more than a few years. Yeah,
like
who would even want to?
Exactly. Dane Cook, Joe Coy, Kevin Hart, they make it such a huge business, and it's a constant promotion. And I remember thinking about Lewis Black back in the day because he used to open for him, and not much, but not when he was at theaters or anything even. But I used to think, or Jim Gaffigan, even if I had that success, I'd still have to be on a tour bus and traveling around. And I wasn't even sure that I wanted that lifestyle. So in those ways, I'm not ambitious for that lifestyle. So I'm not going to try to be that guy. What else can I do in addition? Kind of, that's how I settled with it.
Yeah. I mean, you have to find your place in the constellation. And every once in a while, there are those people who they just click at the right time. They're the right artist at the right cultural moment. And the sort of industry sweeps them off their feet and sort of, they have people to do shit for them for the rest of their lives, but that's increasingly not the case over the last 20 years where everyone is expected to be their own publicist, their own manager, their own booker, their own everything. And that's just a certain kind of personality type that gravitates towards that, and I wish I had it, but I don't. I don't have the ability to spend 24 hours a day in the Christian Finnegan business. It's just of zero interest to me.
Yeah. It's a rare kind of trait that you need. And even if you find it or have it, I bet it gets old to just be constantly being in the promoting of yourself. Business.
Grind set, that whole, and
did you say grind set?
It's like a meme word, get on your grind set. It basically means just the hustle sort of culture.
Right. The thing about bands, though, I'm, maybe a little jealous of in terms of being a 40-year-old and looking for community and friends, I admit, and I found it through the show, frankly. And I've got a lot of, what do you say, IRL friends. But bands get together and jam. And I've always been kind of jealous about what that's like. Just if you're hanging out at somebody's, again, you're 40 years old, you're a lawyer, like a friend of mine, listener John Maltby, he's in a band, he's successful, a super successful lawyer, but he gets together with his buddies who they're clearly close friends, and they hang out as well as play. And when you're, it must be
it gives you something to do. We may have spoken about this recently, maybe even last week, but just about how dudes need a reason to hang out with each other.
I don't think
it gives a structure. Maybe I had this conversation with maybe one of the other podcasts I do regularly. No, just making you jealous. No, I had this conversation recently, just that, guys get to a certain age and it's really hard for men to just be like, let's be friends and let's just go out and be together. and so you have to have some sort of structure. It has to be like watching a football game or, in a jam session. That's probably the best way to do it if you can do it.
Yeah. I kind of want to like, there's two things I want to do that I think I'll never do. Like go in someone's band room, wherever they play in their house, and just be a fly on the wall and see what that's like. I think that's fun. And go into like an AA meeting or an NA meeting. Like just, I am also think that's a really great place for people to go and to connect and to commiserate.
Pick up chicks.
And pick up chicks for sure.
Right.
And other people, whoever's there,
Plumbers.
really. I'm happy to go home with anybody.
Yeah.
This weekend, I'm getting together again. I'm sure you remember me talking about it last year. Second annual high school guys, like 19 in a rented giant house. And the one thing that I think is hilarious, I don't mind saying it, is like only a couple of those guys smoked pot in high school. Now all these 46-year-old guys bring all of it. Like devices, like it's so ubiquitous and legal that all these guys who didn't, were clean cut are now using cannabis products. And I think that
I was one of those guys.
Huh?
Yeah. I mean, I was that guy.
Yeah.
I didn't smoke pot until in my 30s, yeah, I mean, I do think that there's kind of a generational thing that's happening to guys in their 40s right now is because it was forbidden or at least hard to acquire or whatever. There is kind of like a, it's like what happened to Britney Spears when she stopped being a child star. Like all of a sudden they're reliving an old adolescence
right.
that they missed out the first time around. You know what I mean? And so like I sometimes wonder, like I look and I'm like, I probably have more pot stuff than a person my age needs. But I think I'm just kind of getting it out of my system because it just wasn't a thing for my entire, when people usually smoke pot.
And it's something that people tend to do alone now at that age, but also obviously it's always been a social thing. So it's just funny that guys, our age getting together and a whole bunch of these guys just smoking weed is a weird thing. But it's also
I have to be on a really kind of good terms with somebody, very solid ground with somebody to want to be high around them though. Like I'll be drunk around whoever, like I'll have a few beers with whoever. Yeah. But if I feel like you're still making up your mind about me as a person, then I don't really want to smoke pot with you.
Let's say for you right now, like what would be the scenario where you would actually be comfortable, and you can come up with real people in your life or imaginary types that you would be like, you know what, I would do that boys weekend. I would do that thing. I would go to that place and have it be surrounded around maybe that activity with these people. Would you feel comfortable doing that in any hypothetical scenario right now in your life?
Yeah, I do. Well, I mean, I've had that,
forgive me if you do
but it's
that.
always through comedy though.
Sorry.
Like, no, there was, I think I may have mentioned like there's a CC list, like an email CC list that I've been on for literally 25 years with friends of mine who are, not really stand-ups anymore. Most of them have gone into the writing end or left comedy altogether. But we've been on this just sort of running CC list. And it's not all guys, but it's 90%. It's probably, at this point, there's probably only 22 people, and I would say 18 of them are dudes, if not more. But we used to get together quite a bit. Like one of our friends, his family had a house in Fairfield, Connecticut, actually. Huh. And so we would go up there once or twice every summer and stay over and hang out on the beach and crap. And but it's always kind of through the filter of my comedy friends.
Right. What would you, what do you do together? Do you hang out? I mean, what would you be comfortable? How do you pass the time?
The last time we did something like that was probably well over 10 years ago. So maybe it doesn't really apply anymore, but now it's just like if we can get together and have beers once every 8 months, it's an achievement.
Do you feel like you missed out on golf?
I hate golf.
Yeah. Why?
I hate it.
Why?
Multiple reasons. One,
is it the people?
I just think it's a profound lack of real estate and resources. Okay. Agreed. It really, maybe it's just living in New York City for too long, but it seems obscene. It seems like utterly obscene to me when I see golf courses. Like just what a waste of water and landscaping. And surely there's a way to have fun that doesn't require you to dominate the planet Earth. Do you know what I mean? Like, and I think that is part of the appeal for a lot of guys. Is just that, like, look at all of this space that I am taking up right now to amuse myself. Do you know what I mean? That's like, I'm doing something completely unimportant and I'm taking up 5 acres to do it. And suck it, world. Yeah. And also, obviously the sort of cultural associations of golf probably make me judge it a little too harshly. The kind of people growing up that you would see playing golf, either in movies and TV shows, just the associations, which are probably unfair, because I know a lot of people now that play golf who are totally nice, rational human beings.
2 more scenarios, and obviously I want your honest reaction. Me, you, I hope throwing myself in there makes a difference, and a couple of other guys that we both know and like. Maybe we don't both know and like a couple other guys, but we're gonna go play with some other people that we may or may not know. Paintball this weekend. You coming? Paintball.
Oh boy.
Have you ever done it?
Probably not.
You're probably not coming.
First of all, I would feel like such a spaz. I'm really out of shape right now. Like, and so I would roll an ankle immediately. Right. Like, there's no question in my mind that I would end up injuring myself. So you're running away from my gun, and you go, and it's not even my gun. You go down with an injury just from. Oh, 100%. Yep. Some torn ligament, or I would feel grateful if I walked away with it with only a sprain. That's how I would feel about paintball. Maybe I've done laser tag before, but I've never actually done paintball. Again, too many militia types.
That's a good point. Okay, I've got tickets to the Yankees tonight. Are you gonna meet me? Are you gonna go to the game with me?
Yes, that I would go to.
Yeah. Okay.
I don't enjoy baseball like on TV, but I love going to a baseball game because it is primarily a social.
And we'll drink beer and have a hot dog or whatever.
Yeah, and you get the vibe at the baseball stadium. I mean, that's absolutely okay.
All right, so there it is. And
you notice how, like, I picked the one completely sedentary activity?
It doesn't matter. Like, for me, I'm seriously searching this out, and I want, the show and the community to, like, talk about it, because whatever it is, the idea of just kind of being together at this point in our lives and figuring shit out. I mean, I love you. Yeah. I could hang out with you for as long as you could possibly tolerate me, and I don't know how long that would be, but I know for me it would be as long as
1 hour 10 minutes.
What happens at minute 11 that I do?
I don't know. All of a sudden, I just start bleeding from the ears and nose, and I just break down. No, I don't mean to take. Obviously, I'm always going to go for the cheap joke, but I 100% agree with that, and I don't care what it is. I'm just saying that the activity, like whatever it is to get guys together, if you love to exercise and hiking, like, is to me a great thing to do, especially when you have like a loop, if you can find a loop, because then there isn't that awkward moment of like, when are we going to stop doing this? And like,
I was wondering why it had to be a loop. That's great. You've really forecasted.
Because there's a parameter there. Yeah. You know what I mean? That is just kind of like, we're doing this loop, and then there's an organic end to it.
I love it. I love all of it.
Like around a lake. It's perfect.
And I just can't imagine it being me and you and a couple of other guys, especially if we just met them, because I'm positive that I would be able to get a sense of whether or not Mike is annoying you. Like, you don't suffer any fools at this point in your life, do you?
You're wrong. You are completely wrong about that.
Go ahead.
You might be able to pick up on it, but I would promise you, I would go into hyper diplomacy mode.
Oh, really?
I would be incredibly, but I'd be dying inside. It would exhaust me. It would exhaust me.
Right.
Like, I would be friendly and nice, and because these aren't bad people. Like, me not getting along with somebody is not an insult to that other person in my mind. It's more like, what's my damage? But so I would be very diplomatic, I think. But then once it was over, I would go home and sleep for like 3 hours, just from the weight of not like screaming.
Would you ever hide or avoid Mike? from him from the rest of the day or the weekend? Would you be like, I'll be over here? How long does it take for you to hide or avoid him?
Oh boy, I don't know. It depends. If it was the kind of guy who like had to be like, you're a comedian, so I'm going to tell jokes the whole time, and like that would definitely run my, tap my resources a little quicker.
Yeah.
Again, this is why it's always good to have sort of a finite activity. Do you know what I mean? Where it's like, all right, I know that I have to get through this baseball game. This baseball game is 9 innings long. And of course it would go into extra innings just to torture me. But, you have to have off ramps, especially when you're hanging out with, I think it's true of dating. I think it's true of hanging out with people you don't know super well. You have to have easy spots where it's like, okay, well, that was great. I got to go, or just make it simple. And I think both people appreciate that.
I think that's smart. I think that's really smart advice. I definitely don't plan. I don't plan anything. It has ruined me my whole life. It's one of my worst features. And I'm trying to get better at it, but I definitely wouldn't think of how do I get out of this or that. I don't calculate like that.
Well, this is honestly, you say it's one of your worst features. It's one of my worst features too, is like immediately looking for exits.
Well, I don't know. I don't know if that's terribly bad. Because you're also being kind and compassionate to that person too. All right, last one along these lines is, when was the last time you actually did like meet a guy and really enjoy hanging out with him? And what was that about? Like, what does Christian Finnegan enjoy doing with someone that he's just met? Like, that person was really, I'd like to, do that
hang
again.
Out with that person.
Yeah.
It's funny. I did a podcast just last week called Detoxification. I believe it's called Detoxification Pod, and it hasn't come out yet, but I had a really nice conversation with the dude. And at the end of it, we were both like, we should grab coffee sometimes. And I totally meant it. Will that happen? I don't know. I'm not good at it. I'm really not good at it.
At making it happen, or at
making it happen, or just kind of like making it not feel formal. Like I don't know. I don't know. But in term, I see we have a little cabin upstate, and my friend Bob Powers and Amanda Melson, who are a married couple, but they're very good friends of mine. Like, I always hang out with them when we're upstate at the same time, and sometimes with my wife, she's there, sometimes not. So, it's not like I don't see anybody. I'm not, completely cut off from society yet.
Yeah, but I really think most men are. I think it's a
oh yeah.
I think it's a real problem. I think
most men are happier that way, or at least they think they're happier in a risk averse way.
Yes, well said. Yeah, but they're not. They could be. I think loneliness is a killer. And I think that the biggest problem is when you're going through a thing and you feel even like a child that you're the only one, and you feel scared. You have no idea. And it has been such a major difference in my life to add all of these people in to drop all of my problems on them.
To dilute your mania and sort of spread it thin amongst your friends.
It just gives you, like, for example, and I want to get your answer on this. The other day, as you probably know, I have an issue with my reactions that stems from, I think, ego. And so I'm the guy who might get into a too long argument with the gate agent about a thing. I've gotten a lot better at it, but it's most an issue with the people I'm closest with, because someone does a thing that sucks, my reaction to it makes it worse. I escalate it as opposed to de-escalate it. That's my main problem in life. I just did it with someone in my life close to me, and the guy at the gym who I couldn't understand his policy, and he was really inconveniencing me, and I talked to him for 10 minutes. So I tell that problem to a friend, and my buddy in Australia, who I talked to, and he's like, mate, why would you give him so much time? Like, I could have never thought of it, Christian. Like, I couldn't get there on my own. Like, why did I give that guy? Why did I have to prove my point to this person?
Yeah,
how do
you and my wife are very similar in that sense. And it's like, I think, the positive side of that is that you you get shit done, you know, because you do attack things head on, you know, but sometimes attacking things head on is just a massive waste of time and energy. It's just, you know, to not be able to be like, hey, you know what, this battle ain't worth fighting. And the cost in emotion and moments is just not worth it.
So what do you do in that situation where you're a super smart guy, you know all of the answers and reasonable, you're completely composed. Why don't you argue? Why don't you make it an issue with the person?
I mean, I'm not immune to it. I mean, we're all, I think everybody is, I have a dander like anyone, and sometimes it gets up, but, I do think I am generally pretty good at just sort of seeing the future, and sort of cutting bait when I see that a situation is just not worth it. You know, what I always say to my wife when these conversations come up, you know, when she gets really stressed out about a negative interaction she's had with somebody, and you know, when you own a business, especially at a venue where there's beer and shit like that involved, there's going to be issues that come up. And I always just say, like, first of all, follow this scenario through to its worst conclusion. Like, what's the worst, rather than like, this is not exactly what you're talking about, but you know, she'll get up. It's like, well, what if this happens? What if this guy that I had to kick out because he was drunk? Like, what if he starts talking crap about QED and you know, and starts telling other comedians and bad things? And like, well, just follow it through. Like, what's the worst that can happen? And generally speaking, it's probably less bad than your lizard brain wants to believe it is.
Yeah, I can make it the worst.
And also just like, and follow it through. Like how are you going to feel on the other side of continuing this either argument or email thread where, you know, there's a fucking loser who contacted I don't think she'd be mind that I'd say this. He wanted to do some lecture at QED, but you know, it's not really what QED, since the pandemic, we haven't been able to do as many of those. They end up being a lot of work for not a lot of payoff, because there's tech involved and it's a harder market to reach. And we're not back there yet. We're not able to sort of have stand up is a little easier. There's a built-in audience for it. Right. But like having a guy tell a lecture about, you know, ancient Rome or whatever, it's like, well, who's going to show up to that? And so unless the person is like a really good promoter, we're just not really ready to do that crap at QED yet. But this guy just would not take no for an answer. And he was just incredibly rude, just writing back like, hello, like, and you know, and why won't you let me do, you know, why won't you book me? And her instinct, and I think it would be my instinct as everybody's instinct, is to fucking just roast this dude, is to just tear him apart because he's a fucking tool. But I think to myself, like, okay, you can do that. Or you could write the most terse 2-line email. We got your inquiry. We're not interested at this time. Best of luck. It like put a period on it. And yeah, that's not going to be, you know, he's not going to have been made to pay the way you want somebody who's like, that's the thing, is you want justice. And first of all, it's ephemeral. It probably doesn't exist. And you're never really going to feel it. Those moments of like, oh my God, I totally just fucking crushed him. I think maybe in some of it, maybe like internet culture, that dunking culture, it doesn't transfer to real life. We think we're going to be able to come back with some just incredible retort that's just going to shut everything down. That's not really the way person-to-person interactions play out, usually. So cut bait, move on with your life.
The guy said to me, well, what do you want me at the gym? Well, what do you want me to do for you? I was like, nothing. I just want the last 30 minutes of my life back. Can you do that for me? And it was like, it was a snappy retort. And it made me feel better in that moment because I told him what I wanted. He couldn't give it to me. It was shitty. And I felt bad about it afterwards. And so there's also this idea of satisfaction if you put them in their place. And I was just reading some Sharon Salzberg. I don't want to drop a letter and, you know, a name, but I love her. And, you know, it was like she basically spelled it out. It's like, yes, you might feel satisfied in that moment for a moment. But then there's this aversion after that feels horrible and toxic. And that's exactly how I felt. And yet I've done it 1,000 times, Christian. I'm garbage. Garbage.
I mean, I get it. I mean, It's just, yeah, it's an oasis. That feeling of like, oh, if I just continue this argument for another 90 seconds, then I'm going to get the satisfaction that my brain craves. It's not going to happen. Sorry. Go ahead.
The only time I ever got satisfied was I gave a woman, a female gate agent, a really hard time after my flight was canceled. And it was very rude. And I felt horrible about it the whole week. And I happened to fly out of that same spot as when I was working in D.C., and she was there, and I got her flowers and an apology, and she immediately started crying because I think it probably stayed with her like the whole week because I was such a dick. And it was the only time I'd ever been a dick and felt like I'd made, in that kind of with a stranger.
Yeah.
I like to think I always make amends with the people in my life, but but that was the only time where I'd ever got to like have closure on it. And all the other times are open, and I wounded people, and it sucks.
Yeah. No, it's I get it. It's like that raw, it's that screaming into the void. And if I can't get a response from the void, at least I can get a response from you. Like, at least I can ruin your day.
Mm-hmm.
Like, at least that'll make me feel like I've had, like, not feel completely impotent in the face of the universe's.
Yes, that's a good word too. That's a good word I should be using more too. I feel impotent if they got over on me somehow, if they, were like, I didn't get back. Oh, impotent is perfect in that moment.
Well, I remember a friend of mine telling me once that he had gone to the movies with his dad, and it was like a terrible movie, and they were both having a miserable time. And he said, "Let's go." And my friend, and I'm the same way, he was like, "But we paid for this movie. Like, why would we've already paid for it?" And he said, well, we've already wasted our money. Why would we also waste our time? And I think that's a very wise way to approach life, that this sort of sunken cost fallacy. And it doesn't have to be just dollars. It can be emotion. It can be time. It can be anything, this idea of like, well, I'm already angry about this. I'm already in. Why I can't get out now? Yes, you can. You can just get out. You can get out and move on with your life. And honestly, if you really want to dunk on somebody who you're fighting with, or whatever, you moving on with your life, it's like, you don't know that's gonna. It's like they say, success is the best revenge, or whatever. It's not. It's sort of a variation of that, but it's just like, honestly, that will have more of a negative effect on the person you hate than if you continued the argument. You know what I mean? So there's just nothing. There's not really a lot to be gained by engaging in these sort of petty battles with people who ultimately don't fucking matter in your life.
So well said, and really helpful to me, and I'm sure a lot of people listening that have a similar flaw.
Complete horseshit from how I actually live my life, but I know that's the case.
No, I don't believe that. So I also wanted to ask you this week about this Johnny Depp Amber Heard trial outcome. I paid very little attention to it. It was huge on TikTok. So my daughter found out who Johnny Depp was. I don't think she ever really watched any of his films. And the reaction to it has been really, I haven't paid any attention to it. Well, I haven't paid any attention to it, and I haven't talked about it. But now I feel like it is worth talking about because of the outcome and the reaction. And so many people already saying it's the end of the Me Too movement. And not only people who hate the Me Too movement, but people who support the idea of women's liberation, feminism in general, are basically saying, yeah, this was bad. And I'm not sure that I agree or that I understand why. But the other thing was, it was just always in everybody's algorithm, as celebrity trials tend to be. But in this age now of TikTok and everything else, it's interesting how people followed it, especially with trending hashtags. What are your thoughts on that cultural phenomenon finally ending this week, the players, and if it matters at all?
I don't know. Part of me feels like, well, has it ended, or has it just begun? Has it just started Act 2? Because now it's going to be, because there will be a Johnny Depp rehabilitation tour that is coming your way over the next 3 months. He's going to start doing talk shows, and I'm not even saying he shouldn't. I mean, I remain blissfully ignorant of this shit, because who fucking cares? And I'm not saying I agree with what you're saying now. Well, now I have to care, because now it's obviously left the bounds of a relationship, and it's now become a sort of culture war battleground. But, even 6 months ago, you would get online and I've always marveled at these sort of weird bots, these celebrity stan bot accounts that you'll see on Twitter, where it'll just be like the world's biggest Kristen Chenoweth fan, and like all they do is just post pictures of Kristen Chenoweth.
Right.
And they're just defend anybody who says anything negative. You know, obviously the K-pop ones are the most well-known, like the BTS fans and Lady Gaga or, you know, Nicki Minaj or whomever. They've got these fan armies. And that sort of fan army mentality has always just like repulsed me anyway. But you get these, you know, even before the trial, like 6 months ago, you'd get these like Justice for Johnny and
yes, I saw that. Yeah.
So weird. And I kind of just thought it was like, all right, well, clearly he's paying his agent is paying some, you know, market research company to sort of flood the zone with bots. And that's just the world we live in now. But you know, and then there's accounts that are designed that to hate Johnny Depp and it all just seems silly to me. And I would love to have remained blissfully ignorant. Yeah. But, you know, as you said, is you couldn't escape it. And it's like, are we so in desperate need of fucking bread and circus right now that we just have to escape into this completely bullshit personal drama? Like there isn't enough going on in the world right now. Like it's not a slow news day. There are no slow news days right now. So how is it that this has risen to the top of our sort of cultural algorithm? And I think it's because it's like, it doesn't have anything to do with us. Do you know what I mean? That it's like, it's, well, school shootings, that's too awkward, or, you know, inflation or climate change or whatever. But I can have an opinion on fucking Johnny Depp because I saw, you know, Donnie Brasco. You know? Yeah.
No, it's that's true too. I mean, everybody having an opinion on a case. It's really nothing is more. Talk about wanting to leave a conversation. I've overheard a couple of conversations about that trial and or any other kind of high profile trial. And it's like each person has watched a good amount of it or a little of it. And they have these strong opinions in terms of who they side with, which is usually down some kind of tribal lines anyway, black, white, gender, whatever. And it's gross. It's like, you know, why are you talking about them? Why are you thinking about them? Why do you have a strong opinion about who is right or wrong? Imagine two people that are friends getting in a fight over the Johnny Depp Amber Heard because they side.
Yeah. So, somebody on Twitter yesterday, and I don't remember who it was, maybe Helene Olen, I'm not sure, but somebody was bringing up that the crucial point, and this is always how these things happen, where the phrase "believe women" became "believe all women," which is not something that anybody on the left ever said. That was the right wing scarecrow straw man that they created to then argue against. And, you know, nobody ever said every single woman in every single circumstance should be believed. And I know nothing about Amber Heard. Like, so this is not me saying that she wasn't telling the truth or was. I genuinely don't know and won't find out. But I refuse. At this point, I feel like it's a cultural decision for me to not find out.
I'm so glad I asked you about it. It's so well said. I have one final easy question for you, which is I have asked maybe one or two other people this week, but I really want to know your take. I like Tom Cruise a lot, and I don't care what you think, and I don't care what kind of person he is, and I'm uncomfortable with that. I can't wait to see that fucking movie. And I'm
shocked at how many people are talking about how great it is. And like enough people now have said it's amazing that I can't write that off. Like Cambry and I are going to go see it next week because it's like, I guess we kind of have to see Top Gun. Like because I hated the first Top Gun movie. Like it came out right when I was in my sort of poet warrior phase. Like I had friends who loved, but it's just the ultimate sort of Reagan era 80s.
Well, where were you on Iron Eagle?
Not quite as vigilant, pro or con. But I mean, people just keep talking about how great it is, and so I kind of feel like I gotta know. I'm shocked by it.
Does it matter?
I'm not shocked at people loving Tom Cruise, though.
Does it matter that he's a weirdo Scientologist and has done and said a lot of weird stuff? Can I still?
It probably should matter.
Yeah.
But the way I look at it more. It's like if I found out that my car mechanic was a crazy Scientologist guy, it's like, yeah, I'm not going to hang out with him, but I still need my car fixed.
Right.
And that's sort of the way I look at Tom Cruise. It's like, oh, his job is to be a charismatic leading man. Like that's a charismatic action star. Like that's sort of his role. Yeah. And I don't look to him for moral guidance or anything like that. And I certainly don't think that I would like him in real life. But I don't know. I don't know where the line is to when you have to sort of cut bait on someone's artistic output. It's obviously not always easy to.
But there
know.
is a line that can be obvious, but in many cases there isn't. It's not quite so obvious. You really don't know the truth about a person. You've heard things.
Yeah, I mean, the whole where's Shelley Miscavige thing, who's the wife of the main dude at Scientology who just disappeared and no one seems to know where she is. And, that obviously is very strange. And I think that I don't think people fully understand just how. I don't think even after as many documentaries, I don't think people really appreciate just how kind of off the rails Scientology has gotten.
Yeah. I think it gets treated somehow differently than other religions, and it shouldn't. Also, it's weird that you don't know that your mechanic is actually a Scientologist. Don't you take your car to Sea Org Motors?
That is true. It is weird that my mechanic insists on wearing a captain's hat in epaulets.
It is weird that he says he can help your car going clear.
Yes.
Want to keep riffing on this joke that I built up for the last 3 minutes since
what you got here is you got a little bit of Xenu in your in your gas line.
Well,
you got a little too much. You got a little too many thetans.
Luckily, we got a machine here.
Yeah, you hold these two metal rods and you tell us the time that you were gay, and then we use that to blackmail you for millions of dollars once you become a big major action star.
Christian Finnegan does it again. Thank you for joining me. That was awesome. And there he goes. Isn't he great? At Christ Finnegan. Go subscribe to his newsletter. Nothing would make him happier. New music for olds. Get a paid subscription to that. I absolutely love it and have been relying on it to find some great new artists and bring back some of my old favorites. Love reading it, and you should subscribe too and follow him on Twitter. Let him know you heard him, and see us all. Me, Ophira, and Christian, June 11th, in almost at Stamford, Fairfield, Connecticut, everybody. Fairfield Comedy Club. Look forward to seeing you there. That's all I've got for you today and this week. Thank you to all of my guests who joined me this week. If you missed an episode, go back and listen, learn, and laugh along with me. And thank you most of all for those of you who are members of our community, who are subscribers, paid subscribers. If you haven't joined us, more and more people listening to the podcast now, please sign up. It's as little as $5. StandUpWithPete.com right now. Have an awesome weekend. Be the change you want to see in the world. John Carroll, play us out, will you?
You better stand up, stand up. Well, there's a whole lot more of us who know what's right. They'll keep right on ignoring us if we keep sitting tight. You got to open up the window to let in some light. You got to stand up. That's right. You got to rise up. You got to stand up. You got to stare the devil straight in the eye. We got to let him know it's his turn to go. See it clear when all you hear is a lie. Don't get up off of your butt, get down off of your fence. Even if it ain't a very friendly audience, well, they'll begin to listen when you start making sense. And you stand up, stand up. No need to point your rifle to defend your town. Just stand up, stand up. You know they can't deny you what you're laying down. Oh, you better stand up, stand up. Show your face of every color, yellow, black, red, and brown. She's the place where every lost child will finally be found. There's only one thing to do before we stand our ground, and that's stand up, stand up. Well, the founding fathers saw a land for all. They had to stand up, they had to stand up. They had a keen imagination for a crystal ball, drawing all the plans of stand up. But all they had to go on was the time they were in, with other causes for laws, and since they weren't even sin, they knew that change was gonna come before the change could begin. They had to stand up. All right, they had to stand up. We got to stand up. We got to look the devil square in the eye. We got to let him know it's his time to go, and make it clear when all we hear is a lie. Why you lying? see them flee the scene of that experiment. If you stand up, all right, we got to speak up, we got to reach up and raise your voice in every way you know how. Don't be toes up, you got to show up. Ain't no better time to do it than now. No need to pledge allegiance to no wanton tribe. Rise up, show obedience to the voice inside, and listen well, and it'll tell you not to run and hide. It says stand up.